Welcome to the Flag Bearer channel. This is Little Known Black History Facts. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Freedom or Death, the 1811 Slave Revolt, the largest slave revolt in U.S. history that's mostly unheard of. It was the aftermath of the Haitian Revolution that would undergird much of America's preceding slave revolts. In 1804, the enslaved people of Haiti overthrew the French rule and ended slavery on the island nation. French planters left their sugar plantations on the island and fled to New Orleans, bringing with them some of their personal slaves. These black slaves from Haiti brought with them a powerful message, the story of a successful revolt by the enslaved against their masters, which ended in freedom and self-government. 20 years before Nat Turner's infamous rebellion, there was the 1811 German Coast Uprising. The rebellion was also known as Andry's Rebellion, named after the owner of the plantation where the uprising originated. The first major sugar-producing zone in the United States was the site of the largest slave insurrection in U.S. history, 1 year before Louisiana statehood. The sugarcane plantations were the most abhorrent, difficult, stressful, back-breaking of all plantations. The horrible conditions of plantations across the South undoubtedly fueled the large-scale resistance. Following the revolution in Haiti, many Americans, Thomas Jefferson included, were terrified that such a revolt would inspire and be emulated in the States. They were right to worry, also as blacks outnumbered whites in the New Orleans region by a ratio of 5-1. Also, because of the large population of free blacks in the area, it was assumed that they would help and support such a revolt. The 1811 German Coast Uprising in the territory of Orleans was the largest slave revolt in U.S. history, where it's estimated that an army of over 500 enslaved people took up arms against the slave and landowning elite. It was called the German Coast from the large population of German pioneers who had settled the land in 1721. One of the most suppressed and hidden stories of African and African American history is the story of the 1811 Slave Revolt. Charles Delong, a slave of Haitian descent, led a band of slaves to raid the plantations around the east bank of the Mississippi River in what is now Louisiana's St. John the Baptist and St. Charles parishes. The rebellion started at the Woodland Plantation located in La Place, Louisiana. The aim of the revolt was to establish an independent republic, a black republic. Over 500 Africans from different nations with different languages would wage a fight against U.S. troops and the territorial militias. This revolt would start in St. John the Baptist and St. John parishes about 30 miles upriver from New Orleans. At that time, New Orleans was the capital of what was called the Orleans Territory. The revolt sought to capture the city of New Orleans and make New Orleans the capital of the new republic. This revolt did more than depict the imagery of Haitian revolutionary struggle. It threatened the slave-owning classes' control of New Orleans. The most notable figure of the revolt was Charles Delong. Delong was born in Saint-Domingue, which was a French colony in Hispaniola, now known as Haiti. He was a slave who could be thought of as an American counterpart to Toussaint Louverture. It was the Louverture and the influence of the entire Haitian Revolution that would serve as an inspiration for Delong and would be the basis of the entire 1811 revolt. On the sugar plantation owned by Manuel Andry is where the rebellion started. Andry owned more than 80 slaves, more than any other slaveholder in St. John the Baptist parish. During a ferocious downpour on a cold, windy evening of January 8, 1811, in the territory of Orleans, Charles Delong led a band of an estimated 25 like-minded slaves into the big house, where they attacked the sleeping Andry and killed his son Gilbert. Although severely wounded, Andry managed to escape his assailants and, in a desperate search of safety, crossed the west bank of the Mississippi River. After taking over the Andry plantation, Delong and his small army sacked a store of weapons, ammunition, and militia uniforms being warehoused on site. They then began a 2-day march toward New Orleans, where they hoped to join with other revolutionaries there and take over the city. After looting Andry's estate, the insurgents moved southward rapidly along the East Bank levee, following the contours of the Mississippi River. The East Bank on the German coast, with sugar plantation clusters along the riverfront, contained the highest density of slaves in the territory. The rebels soon crossed into St. Charles Parish and headed for New Orleans, little more than 30 miles away. The slaves marched noisily, according to eyewitnesses, in military-style formation. They beat drums, waved flags, and carried a variety of weapons, including firearms. Slaves from other plantations joined the rebels, who were recruited in passing, using force and intimidation in some cases to swell their ranks. The ranks of the slave revolt grew to more than 500. More than half of the rebels were born in Africa, speakers of West African languages like Twi, as well as Bantu languages from Angola. Some had previous military experience from their lands of origin. Panicked whites, who were warned of the movement, scrambled for safety down the river road to New Orleans. William Claiborne, the territorial governor, called out the militia, ordered a lockdown of shops and cabarets, and imposed a curfew. General Wade Hampton, commander of regular troops stationed in the area to guard the territorial frontier, had arrived in New Orleans 2 days before the revolt. He took command of a hastily mustered force of regular troops, militia, and volunteers who headed northward on January 9th to confront the rebels. Hampton's mobilization represents the first time in U.S. history that federal troops were mobilized to suppress a slave insurrection. The revolt climaxed on the morning of the second day, January 10th, as these three forces converged for the kill: the rebels, the federal troops, and the militia. A unit of Hampton's forces made the first contact shortly after the rebels had crossed into Orleans Parish. The main body of rebels had hunkered down at night on a sugar plantation owned by Jacques Fortier, about 18 miles from the city. Hampton planned to surround the rebels after dawn with a coordinated attack. Once on the offensive, however, Hampton discovered to his astonishment that the reportedly drunk and disorderly rebels had abandoned Fortier's plantation in the dead of the night, headed northward. The rebels were caught off guard by Andry's militia after it had quietly crossed over the Mississippi's west bank. Lines of charging mounted militiamen, including free persons of color, broke the rebels' ranks. The battle quickly turned into a rout. The rebellion was brutally crushed. More than 6 perished in the initial fighting. 95 were executed. Some escaped to the swamp to later join Maroons. Unfortunately, many slaves betrayed the uprising by either voluntarily alerting their masters or negotiating their individual freedom in exchange for intelligence. As a result, Charles Delong was captured. His hands were chopped off while he was still alive, but cauterized to keep him alive. He was tortured for the better part of the day, shot in both legs, and then burned alive on January 15th. His body was cut up and displayed inside of the city as a lesson to all those who would follow his example. To this day, very few people have even heard of Delong, let alone the movement that he led. To deter future slave rebelliousness, whites cut off the heads from multiple black corpses and placed them atop poles at regular intervals along the East Bank levee for more than 30 miles from Andry's plantation to the gates of New Orleans. The heads of the leaders were put on poles as a warning to enslaved people to never step out of line again. Although historians have largely overlooked this event, no slave insurrection in U.S. history left more black bodies on the battlefield. Close to 100 slaves died either in combat or by execution soon afterward. The 1811 insurrection combined African and Creole slaves, men and women, field hands and more privileged slaves, mulattoes, and blacks. After the rebellion, authorities tightened the restrictions governing the activities of free blacks in Louisiana, while freeing some loyal slaves who had provided information or who, by serving in the militia, helped crush the uprising. In the aftermath of the revolt's suppression, citizens of the territory effected police and militia reforms and demanded an increased presence of federal troops. Newspapers across the country chronicled the event in gory detail. However, the national historical memory of Charles Delong and the German Coast Uprising pales in comparison to the much smaller revolt known as Nat Turner's Rebellion that took place in Virginia in 1831. This is most likely because Louisiana at the time was a very recent annexation into the United States and therefore still seen as an untamed territory where violence and lawlessness could be anticipated. In November 2019, American artist Dred Scott organized a reenactment in Louisiana. Over 2 days, hundreds marched 26 miles dressed in period costumes, armed with prop machetes and muskets and chanting for freedom. The reenactment was the culmination of a period of organization and preparation that took place upriver from New Orleans in the locations where the 1811 revolt occurred, with the ex-urban communities and industry that had replaced the sugar plantations as its backdrop. The reenactment was an impressive and startling sight with hundreds of black reenactors, many on horses, flags waving, in the 19th century French colonial garments, singing in Creole and English to African drumming. Until next time, if you like little-known history facts as I do, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Press the bell to be notified of future uploads. Thank you for watching.